Hello, I'm Vlad, and I'm glad to share some tips on creating scientific graphics. This video is somewhat retrospective because I have created the presentation 6 years ago from now in 2018. I presented it to my junior and senior colleagues, and I acknowledge their names here. They just published 2 articles on the aspects of doing research and teaching electrochemistry at the University of Tartu. So I started that presentation by showing this figure. I'm sorry for the quality. I have scanned this from a 100 years old journal. What I want to show with that is that century ago, scientists with artists, they paid a lot of attention to how to present their data. And somewhere in between, while scientists had still experience with drawing figures by their hand with a ruler and a pen, they still paid attention to many details, like you can see here in the figure on the left. All the lines are labeled, all the markers have different shape. Those days people could not use color, so they were not really spoiled with with easy ways to present the data in just one click. They had to put a lot of efforts in every single figure. Somewhere in between, when we started to use Excel and similar programs, we were spoiled by this easiness of creating graphics, and how perhaps a generation of scientists lost this feeling of paying attention, making beautiful, consistent graphics. Yes, indeed, this graphic on the left and the right, it does show the whole information. However, it is a bit clumsy. I hope you agree, because next I would like just to stress 2 most important things. The main rule in creating the figures is that a figure should explain itself. And perhaps the main concept when you're making several figures for your articles is that you consistently use the same labels, the same markers, the same colors, the same type of captions, the same type of labels, the same fonts. And then it becomes easy for the reader to follow your story through the figures. I would like to show you some good examples. And before, I must explain what is vector and raster graphics so that you know this very basic but very important aspect. On the left, you have a vector graphic, which on the top it presents a dot, and each dot is defined by lines. Whereas on the right, you have raster graphic, and the same dot is presented by pixels. When vector graphic is zoom in, because it is given by the equations and formulas, your computer will recalculate the shape of the visible fragment of that image, and you will see it as a smooth curve. Whether if it's a raster graphic, you zoom in and you start seeing pixels. And here I'm showing the logo of the University of Tartu on the left, and you can zoom as much as possible, and you will still see smooth curves. Whether on the right you see the same logo, but now it is rasterized, and definitely if it's a small one you might not see the difference, but if you zoom in you will definitely see this blurry image because you can start seeing pixels. Now I will be presenting some of my figures. This one was created for a review, and perhaps if you know ionic liquids, then many reviews on that subject will start with just showing the types of cations and types of anions. When I was creating this figure, I used a free software which is called GIMP to draw all the formulas, and then I exported it in different formats like SVG, XML, and finally to PNG. This is a combination of different software here and different ways of presenting. First was presented with actually visualized in a VMD software, snapshot of a simulation. I have applied different filters there, and finally I have exported an image of my system which I modeled, and on top of that I have added a potential profile which is shown here in green. In order to combine everything, I used different software. For example, to create this line for potential, I have used real data and I have plotted it with XMGrace in some XVG format. and I used VMD to create a TIFF format image of my systems, and then I combined them together in SVG using Inkscape. And finally, for publication, I exported to EPS format. So here, let me just advertise that Inkscape program is great software for creating scientific graphics. Where in that program you can combine different formats together in a very comprehensive, easy to use way. And again, I used Inkscape to put together all different plots, which I created using matplotlib. This is basically top left figure. And matplotlib is a way to represent your data using Python language. Next, we can go to that image from another work of mine. And you can see that I'm consistently using red and blue in their most pure form. That's because they match together very well. Red is a bit light, blue is darker, and when you print it in gray, then you can still see everything very clearly. The middle image was generated from Avogadro, and I used POV to render the image. Now, I would like to pay your attention to how people see your figures. In the left plot, I have used consistently this kind of red and blue color because I knew that people with vision deficiency, they can use it also very well. And I'm showing you how people with protanopia see the figure in the middle, and also with deuteranopia on the right. And how do I visualize these figures? I'm using GIMP, and there you can apply some filters with color deficient visions, and you can also make it black and white. And in this way, you can easily check whether your figure is visible to all of your reader. In our group, we had some Excel tables which were given from supervisor to a student, and then in my case, I obtained this software page where I just copy pasted my results from some strange text format, and then in this Excel I was analyzing all the plots. So I gave my Excel tables to my student, and again my student started to copy paste the experimental data and analyzing it in Excel. Finally, we wanted to show plots like shown here. However, when I started to ask more and more from my students to apply different markers and apply different colors in a consistent way, then we decided, okay, it's too much labor work, too many manipulations by hand. Why not to use some automation? And for this article in 2016, we applied Daniel's Excel toolbox. I have no idea whether it's still supported and whether you can still use it, but at that time when we use it, it was a great way to automate changing all the colors. Basically, we created our own set of rules, and then we applied to all the figures that were kind of automatically generated within one huge Excel table with a lot of tabs there, with a lot of columns filled with the numerical data from the experiment. I really like this approach because it saved a lot of time, and you can see definitely that it pays off. The figure here is more vivid, and it does apply some knowledge about differentiating colors and shapes. So from now on, let me just summarize that you can use software and different formats in a smart way. For simple plotting, you might need XMGrace. That's for Linux mostly, and you can use spreadsheets like Google Docs, Excel, or how is it called, LibreOffice. Then for analyzing and plotting at the same time, I would advise using R or Python, namely matplotlib. For processing your figures, I would definitely advise vector graphics like implemented in Inkscape and CorelDRAW. I think Adobe Photoshop as well. For dirty editing, that means your final result will be blurred because it will be raster. You can always use free software GIMP or Photoshop. And when you are thinking about the format, of course, the data should be stored in some perhaps TXT or CVS format, or maybe some database whether the image is, it's great to save an SVG file, because from SVG you can get EPS or TIFF, which are usually required by the publisher. Well, nowadays it's not so. Nowadays you can send a PDF image, and that is probably the best format. And for tables, perhaps Excel toolbox still works. If it doesn't, then please try to find something that will automate changing all the styles in your Excel table to one format. I really like that. Again, I remember that with Excel toolbox, it was really easy to fix the sizes of all the figures and make the titles, font sizes the same, just in a few clicks. And some tips, again, probably it's not really necessary nowadays, but if you still need to save EPS file, please use embed fonts, because otherwise the figure might not look on other computers the same way as you see it on your screen. Then definitely avoid transparency, you will have a lot of problems with that, and take care of raster insets and effects of filters. Well, just prefer other formats like PDF. Now, I'm going to show something from this article. Create the simplest graph that shows the information you want to illustrate. On the left you have a bad example, on the right you have a better example, because it's simpler and it basically conveys the message to the reader in a plain way. Consider the way of visualizing objects and their attributes. Here, the left image looks messy, whereas the right image is easier to comprehend because it's kind of table, but it's also with colors, and you can understand that it's temperature from 1 to 19 somewhere, and you have some labels which denote them. You will find out what they denote in the caption. Select meaningful axis. On the left you can see something that manipulates the presentation. It shows only some selected ranges, whether it always meaningful to show perhaps wider range on the right from 0 to 2000, because now we can really compare the height of those bars. And if you want to focus on the changes, then you probably need to zoom out. That's the opposite trick, of course, and that's the figure on the right bottom one, because now you would like to stress that the differences in height are important. Consider transformations of data from linear scale to logarithmic scale. Use lines when connecting sequential data only. Here on the left we had some data points, but they are not really connected because there is a huge gap between 10 and something like 17, and it is more honest to present it like we see on the right. Aggregate larger data sets in a meaningful way. The left figure, it's a bit messy again. The right figure, it shows trends. Keep axis ranges as similar as possible to compare variables. And on the left, someone tried to plot all the data in the same figure, whether you can always split the figures into subplots like shown on the right, and that would be more honest to your readers because now they can investigate your data more closely. Select an appropriate color scheme based on the type of your data. Now, both figures are actually good because on the left we would like to use a sequential scheme. On the right we're using, I think it's called diverged color scheme, where we would like to highlight that something has negative values and positive values, which we can denote with different colors. When you choose a color map, there are actually more than one website, but I here would like to refer to Matplotlib Color Maps webpage, where you will learn about sequentials and diverging and different kinds of color maps. For accounting color blindness, you can go to this webpage and it will present a palette very well and very carefully choosing sets of colors which you can safely use, and all your readers will distinguish the colors. Here is how it will look like. On the top you see, probably if you don't have visual deficiency, you will see it as I see, I don't know how to say it, but if you do have some color blindness, you will see it differently, and the next lines, the second, the third, and the fourth, will show you that some colors are almost indistinguishable for perhaps 1% of population. Next, I will be showing something from that article. Remember that when you are creating graphics, you can play with shape, with size, with orientation, with weight, with position, and with color. And this slide represents how it actually affects your understanding. You can definitely differentiate between different shapes, sizes, orientations, weights, positions, and colors. Here's my checklist for you. Draw a sketch on a paper by hand. Set template width to, for instance, if you are making a one column width figure, then the width must be set to about 8 centimeters or approximately 3 inches. That is always given on the publisher's webpage. In the description how the graphics must be prepared, please check the guidelines. For the font size, use something that is closest to the text, from 8 to perhaps 13 pt. pt is the points, I think. And if I'm not mistaken, in usual articles, the normal font size is something like 9. So your labels could be a bit smaller, not too small, from 8 to 10. But please do use the correct font size from the very beginning, because when you use the same close to real width of the figure with close to real font size, then you don't need to change your figure when you paste it to your document. So I mean, if you from the beginning use the wrong size of your figure with huge font and eventually you put it into your article, you will definitely see that they do not match. The sizes are different. From the beginning, just use realistic sizes. Next point, use layers and groups when editing with Inkscape, or if you use PowerPoint, you can have the same feature of grouping objects there. Next, examine color deficient visions using GIMP. That's very easy, it doesn't take too much time, perhaps up to 5 minutes, but you will be sure that everyone can see your figure clearly. Do the same with grayscale and print out. Take a look how your figure looks like on paper. Finally, don't hesitate asking opinions from your colleagues. Next, I'm taking some example from IFT scientific journals. It's pretty long to describe here. They, they do provide a guideline. I don't really agree that the figure on the left looks much worse than the figure on the right. They could do much better work here. Let me just comment what I don't like. You can read, of course, what they pay attention to. What I pay attention on this final figure is that those A labels, I would prefer to put them outside the figure, because you don't really publish only for your article. You would like to use the same figures in presentations. So for presentations, it would be much easier than to crop that image and copy paste. But imagine you take figures from different articles and then you will have inconsistent labeling like A on the same slide. Why not to use color? The markers are too small, I would say. The lines are not really needed here. So too much noise in these figures, and here you cannot really distinguish between them. If it's really important, you could change the scale to pay attention to the differences. Perhaps you could add some elements highlighting what's really important in this figure. Also, you see inconsistency in milligram, kilogram. I don't really understand what it is. Probably it should be mass in kilograms, but then use the same notation for time. You write it explicitly time here. Why not to write explicitly mass? I would advise writing, by the way, in full. Like maybe in the article, you define potential with U, or maybe phi, or maybe V letter, and you do it consistently in one article. But again, when you're doing a presentation and copy pasting to a presentation, then it might happen so that on the same slide you will have different notations. But if you write time, then no one will be mistaken by that. Write mass and unit. Write time and unit. Next, there's one example about the table of contents figure. Actually, I think it's most important figure in your article because this is something that your readers will see on the publisher's webpage, or probably they have RSS reader and they will see them in their mobile phone. That would be the first image they will actually see, and they would need to decide whether to read your article further or not. This example shows how such a figure is created. First of all, someone created a very colorful picture, highlights, probably made in Inkscape, but then the task is not to make it vivid and colorful. The task is to attract readers' attention. So then the people just remove the reflections. Why? Because they distract. Then it's always a great idea to limit the number of colors you use because colors, they also distract you from understanding what it is. And then you see that the lines were all the same, almost the same width as well. So someone gave them an idea that you can try dashed lines. And during that process, people removed many unnecessary lines. And you see, they start to play with different styles of arrows. That's a great way to analyze what were they actually thinking about. Anyway, most important information is given in the text, in the labels. Please remember that your figure must tell the whole story by itself. And when you do many figures for one article, please stay consistent.